And welcome to another Biddle on Saturday, February 15th, 2020. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Doing very well.
Good, Rocco.
Doing good.
Doing good.
Okay.
Doing
We're
well.
officially open for business.
Excellent.
So I am going to do my best to get through this. And if not, my friend Eric and Nate are going to continue on without me. But yeah, before we get started, there are two things that I want to get out there is I wanted to get everybody's thoughts on the vote poll. So we'll probably get into that in the second hour, but just know that that's something that I would like to get all your opinions on what you think of it and how it's working out. And then everybody's been talking about LBRY. And that is LBRY. That is a place to watch videos. And most Linux channels are on there now. I've been on LBRY for a while. And I did make a link tonight so that if you wanted to find it easy, it's just bigdaddylinks.com/LBRY. So there you go. Now, the one downside to that is I noticed that not all of my videos were syncing with LBRY. And I emailed support, and they got back to me and said that they have a 2-hour limit on videos that sync from YouTube to LBRY. So any video that I've made over 2 hours is not on there. He suggests that I personally upload them. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go back and upload all of the Biddle episodes for the last 2 years. So at some point, maybe they'll lift that restriction and those videos will be on there, but there you go. There's that.
Is the restriction of 720p still on there as well?
Well, I don't know if there's a restriction of 720. Well, there may be, because in that email, he said to me, I would use Handbrake and do 720p web streamline. So maybe there is still a restriction on that, but either way, all of the other videos are there. It's just the ones that are over 2 hours are not. So.
Okay.
All right. We have been trying out Clear Linux this week, and we're going to get everybody's thoughts on it. Now, I noticed that in the first couple days, people were not real keen on it. Like, I noticed some bad comments on the first couple days of people trying it. And yet, I had the exact opposite experience with Clear Linux that I did with Solus the week before. So I was able to install Clear Linux with zero problems whatsoever. I thought the installer was perfect. And I got to a desktop immediately. There are certain things I really like about Clear Linux, and that's the software center. I won't say it's the software center. It's the software page on Clear Linux website. And what that does is it gives you exact commands to put in for your Clear Linux distribution to install programs. So if you're looking for this specific program, you search for it, you find it, it gives you the terminal command to put in, and you're off and running.
It sounds kind of like Flatpak.
Part of it is Flatpak. So the whole search software part of the website includes Flatpaks, and it includes the app bundles that they do. So it shows you which one it is. But yeah, I mean, it's basically like that. And I thought it was great. The one thing that I had trouble with was H.264. But I found a post on the Clear Linux forums that detailed specific instructions on how to get it running. Went through that and had no issues whatsoever. So out of the box, Firefox would not play live streams. It would play regular videos, but it would not play a live stream video. So it was because of the H.264 codec. So I ended up installing that, and it played live videos fine. So I have had zero trouble with Clear Linux so far. And I downloaded the Phoronix test suite on it, and I'm hoping to do some benchmarks on it this week yet. So
Okay,
there's my take.
great. Well, you're right. That's quite a turnaround. I did not get a chance to try it this week. I will try it this upcoming week and hopefully get a chance to add my 2 cents in there. Nate, I don't think you had a chance either, if I'm not mistaken.
Nope. I didn't get round to it.
Well, I'll get you one of those if you've ever seen those corny things.
I have one over there, actually.
Of course you do. All right. Well, Vash, did you get a chance to try Clear Linux?
I did not.
All right. Clearing out the top row here. Tony, I know you had to have tried it.
I have.
Okay.
You need a minimum of an 8-character password.
You do, Tony.
So-
yes, you're right.
I wasn't happy about that, but it is what it is. But it looks clean. It seems to work quite well. I tried to install something. I can't remember exactly what it was now because it was at the beginning of the week. And I went to their website and followed their tutorial on how to get something to work. And it didn't work. So I'm going to have another look at it this week. But so far, it looks really good. We'll see how it goes next week.
I think I saw something where someone said there is a way to manually override that 8-character limit. I'm not entirely sure. I'm confident in that, but I think that's something
No.
you may... No?
Well, it's like the Solus problem. You can override that, but I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Dave that said don't because it can cause other problems.
Okay, so there's an expectation then. Okay.
Yeah, I would probably not override it. It's a bugbear with me. I just don't want to be told what I've got to do. I want to do whatever I want. If I want to put in 1 on its own as a single digit, then let me. Tell me it's dangerous, but don't tell me not to do it.
No, it's a fair point.
You know, it is what it is.
All right. Well, best of luck in the week coming up then. If you are able to overcome that and the other issues, then hopefully you can report back next week.
Yeah, will do.
All right.
Peter.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Both of you want me. Excellent. So
We're just too excited.
I would love to test Clear Linux, mostly because of the kind of Solus connection it had, but I don't have the hardware. I discovered that my testing laptops are too old. The Intel processors are too old. Plus, they do not support UEFI, and Clear Linux only uses EFI. It does not use Grub. I also only have GNOME boxes installed on my Filio, and it didn't work in there. I don't have VirtualBox set up, and I am not going to mess with my Filio system with Solus to have a dual boot with Clear Linux. Just not going to try that, huh? So far, I've not been able to test it.
I wonder if, so you mentioned that they only support UEFI. I wonder if their focus is just squarely on modern hardware. Does anyone?
It sounds like it. According to the, I posted in the discourse a link to their page of requirements. Huh?
They have no plans to include legacy hardware at all. So it's just going to be strictly UEFI as I understand.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh, you're muted, Nate.
You know, sometimes you find out you really don't know what you're doing. Thank you, Peter. Derek.
Hello, how are you guys doing today?
Fantastic.
I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to be able to test it this week. It's been kind of crazy over here with my parents and my wife. So I've been taking care of things at home. But I'm hoping to try it on a virtual machine this week.
Tell the truth. You've been too busy making videos.
No.
I have been making videos, but it's also something to keep my mind fresh and moving.
How's your wife, Derek?
She's doing better. She's kind of pushing herself a little bit too hard, putting too much weight on the ankle that just got the surgery done on it. I'm hoping that it doesn't take too long for her to be out, but we're looking at probably about a month and a half, 2 months.
Sorry to hear that,
Okay.
brother.
Well, you got to do what you got to do, man. Big Pod, have you tried Clear Linux?
I did try Clear Linux. I installed it onto a VM, and on hardware there is really no difference. So I mainly messed with the VM version, where I installed both server and client and desktop versions. I got to say that installer is, especially the server one, is quite involved, or it is more you have to think what you're pressing, because it is made for system administrators, not for normal users. And the desktop installer is basically a better version of the server installer. Besides that, I spent a lot of time thinking about its telemetry. Even during the install was the most part, because one of the questions they ask during the installation is whether you want to allow telemetry or not, and by default it's checked as you want to allow it. But I'm gonna say like this: one of my professors said that the telemetry and data in general aren't like gold, what they used to say, nor oil. They're like air. So everybody will collect data. Problem is if they ask you if you want to give it, or if they just take it. And I didn't go deep into what they take, or if even saying that you don't want to send it really doesn't send anything. Didn't go into that. But I don't know. It is good that they at least ask you. They don't just take it. On the other hand, it's GNOME, so that's cool. I like GNOME. It works well. And I don't know. It works great. I didn't have a problem with it, so I
Now,
don't have much to complain.
did you download the server? Were you thinking of testing out something specific? I hadn't looked. Are they extolling virtues of their server version?
I didn't think of something specific to use. I just installed the server version, and just to go through install, I planned on doing some stuff with the server version next week.
Okay.
So I will tell on that what to discard next week.
Okay. All right. Stephen, are you there, sir?
Hey, good evening, guys.
Good evening.
I did install Clear Linux in a VM. I've actually been sort of casually looking at this project for a couple months. Not actually installed it, but just reading up on anything because it looked kind of interesting, something different, an independent distro, so it's not Debian or Arch based. It's sort of reminded me of a little bit of Solus, I guess. Not that necessarily the desktop worked, but just sort of the philosophy of it. And the installer reminded me of the Solus installer a little bit, custom installer, a nice dark theme. It's very well laid out. It's very efficient installer. It's fast. It had all the options were basically right there at the beginning, and you just put in your information and go. The couple things, issues that I had after the install, I thought it was interesting that after the reboot, I had a very strange host name assigned to my computer. It started like with CLR hyphen and then like 25 digits. So it wasn't my normal computer name, which I thought was strange. Obviously, that's an easy fix to easy thing to correct, but it just seemed a little bit strange. I haven't installed much software on it or anything yet, so I don't have like any in-depth thoughts on it. It looks really nice, but I've still got some playing around to do. I did notice when I installed it in VirtualBox, it took me about a half hour to get it configured because there were several special options you had to choose, and which I wasn't aware of until I went back and actually read their website, the instructions on how to install on VirtualBox. It worked great once I got that done, but yeah, that was a bit of a curveball, but looks kind of cool. Part of it, I guess that there are parts of it that kind of seem like it might be a bit, I'm not going to say unfinished, but maybe a little bit rough around the edges. I know it's a new project, and so I'm sure that's part of it. But I think it's an interesting distribution to watch in the future.
About the host name, it is actually an installer. You can choose what your host name is under advanced options. It's a second tab besides the options you have to set. There is a second tab, advanced options, where one of the choices is host name, and you can set it whatever you like during install.
Oh, awesome. I must have overlooked that. Thanks, Big Bob.
Now, you mentioned the VirtualBox settings. I noticed that they suggested a 32 gigabyte drive for the VirtualBox, which seemed a little big to me. I wasn't sure if it was actually using that much space. It doesn't seem like it would, but that was their recommendation. So, Dan Kelly, he's got his glasses on in his notebook. All right, folks, here we go.
Okay, Eric. Where they show on the VirtualBox for the 32 gigabytes, if you go to the system requirements page, it says 20. Now, I started out with 18 like I do with all Linux distros, 16 to 18, and the installer would stop right where you get to the point where you set up your hard drive. So it wouldn't even see a hard drive. But if I went and I dug up VirtualBox instructions from the Clear Linux website, and I put it in our discourse server. So it's in there if somebody wants to actually get quick access to it to do a VirtualBox. There are some things when you set up your VirtualBox you got to be aware of. There's a chipset setting that you got to change. Or at least they show it in the pictures in the VirtualBox settings. You must check the EFI box. It's an EFI only system, and it'll roll right through, and it should install once you get all them things and them pictures set the way they should. The only thing that kind of will throw you off is a SVGA setting. It'll default back to its normal VBox VGA. The 8-character password, yeah, that turned me off too. You know, I went from Solus, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I had to add 2 more for 8. So, you know, the terminal, yeah, I got the terminal with when you open it up, it's got this big long number across the top of it where your prompt is. That kind of threw me. And then I started thinking, I wonder if it's a serial number for the telemetry. So that was a thought that occurred. Their packages are called bundles. That kind of threw me off too. So you have to do a bundle add or a bundle remove if you do anything from the command line instead of install. The silly software would not detect my printer whatsoever, but it detects my scanner. And then it wants to calibrate my scanner, but the calibration don't work. So I don't know what to say about that. I'm not going to really get into the GNOME at all. I think we've done enough GNOME installs. Everybody knows GNOME. You know, GNOME's GNOME. However, I did notice right-click on the icons to actually where you go and you get a little dialog box, and down at the bottom of it says Show Details. If you click on that, it just opens the Software Center. That's all I got out of that. Moving on to other things, this evening I spent a lot of time installing the NVIDIA drivers because I have a NVIDIA graphics card. They do have a how to do that. You do most of it through the terminal, and then you go and download the drivers and install them through the terminal from the NVIDIA. I got drivers 440.59 is what it recommended for my card. But if you go to that VirtualBox how-to, I told you it's on our discourse. Down the side, you'll see it'll have 2 tutorials. Open that up, and they'll be in there how to install the NVIDIA drivers. It'll take you about a half hour to an hour to roll through it. Let's see, the bundles covered that. Flat packs, yes, could get them to work. Snaps, no. And with that said, it's kind of funny they chose SWUPD for their package handling name. SWAPD, I guess you'd call it. But that's my take on it. I mean, it's nice looking. It's kind of lacking in errors, like it's missing pieces and stuff like that. But I think the desktop version might be something they're trying to establish so they can make something to compete with Chromebooks. I mean, it looks like that's something that could be a possibility, especially, you throw something with the Intel name next to a Chromebook, people are going to start thinking, do I want an Intel or do I want a Chromebook? And that's my final thoughts on it.
Yeah, if I could explain the SWAPD as well, there's a program called FWAPD, and that's for firmware updates. That's what it stands for. SWAPD is software updates. So that's where the name comes from.
Oh, leave it to Schickel. He's always got an answer for everything.
Totally random.
He's a handy guy to have around.
Yeah, I'm going to get his trading cards.
Yeah, he's onto it.
Well, thanks for posting that stuff in the forum. That's really helpful for everybody. And thanks for the review, Dan. I appreciate
Yeah, if you even look at that VBox how-to, and if you look at the pictures, it shows you what to check. And you do have to change the default chipset type. It may not install unless you do that, as well as check the UEFI and things like that. I don't know if the 32 gigabytes is mandatory, but I kept trying it with 18 and 16. It wouldn't take. So I just put the 32 and it showed there, and it took that. I don't know if it'll take the 20 they recommend for the requirements.
Got it. Well, I'm going to try it out this week, and I'll actually try it with 20 and see if it'll take it. I'll let you know.
If you try it with 20, if it don't take 20, try 21 or 22.
Doesn't work with 20. I'll probably just do 32. I don't know that I'll be that methodical, but we'll see if I have time. But all right. Well, thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Penguin.
Yes, Eric.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Finally back. It's good to be back.
It's good to see you. Did you get a chance to try Clear Linux?
Not on my laptop, but I do actually have a server that runs Clear Linux, and it's been running Clear Linux for about 6 months. And but other than that, no, I have not had time. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you my take next week.
All right, sounds good.
Colin, how has your journey with Clear Linux been, or did you take that journey?
Well, I started off last week and absolutely made an absolute mess of things. I was trying to focus on what we were talking about here, and I was trying to dual boot it with elementary, and I messed it up big time. So I had to go back and figure out what was the process of that. So I've actually made a video on how to dual boot with an Ubuntu base, which they do have on their website, how to do that. So I have achieved that in VirtualBox. Now I've done that on real hardware. So that works out really well. So we'll get to that video. I digress with my videos during the week to make something else I thought was a bit more important. So I haven't had a chance. I have messed around with it a little bit. I was a little bit confused about the software manager at first. I thought it was up, but it's actually swap. So I thought that was a build, add, and all this sort of stuff. So, but I think everything that's in the software online that Rocco was talking about is in the software center, I'm pretty sure, including Flatpaks in the search criteria. So I've sort of figured that out. I tried to install my favorite note-taking app, Cherry Tree, but it's not available anywhere as a Flatpak or in the software center. I do have like a backup Joplin, that's not there as well. So I think they don't have a lot of packages in the software center by the looks of it. That's only from my perspective anyway. But I'm hoping to get a chance to mess around with it a bit more. I do have NVIDIA Optimus on this computer that I'm running it on, but I don't know if I'm daring enough to go there with NVIDIA with the Optimus. But so far, so good. Dual booting's working out fine. And it seems to be pretty quick and snappy. So, and it's got the GNOME desktop. I'm happy about that. So I'll continue to probably test a bit more and during the week. But so far, so good. That's my take.
Well, excellent. Thank you for that. DJ Ware.
Yes. Hello.
Have you tried? Have you
Yes.
tried?
Yes, I
Linux?
have.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, tell us about it.
So I initially tested Clear Linux last summer, and when this challenge came out, I decided to reinstall it and try it again. I first started with VirtualBox, but I noticed it was taking an awful long time to install. So I stopped, went back, and installed it under KVM using Virt Manager, and it was much faster to install with the native KVM. I don't know what's going on there with VirtualBox, but it was one of the things I found out, and a significant difference, about 2 to 3 times slower on VirtualBox to install. I've been testing some of the more esoteric things about the system. The first thing was the stateless part of the system. Etsy and var are stateless. So if you want to return your system back to a default state, you can delete those directories and reboot the machine. So if you get yourself crossways with a configuration error, it's pretty easy to recover from it. The other thing I was interested in is in Docker. Docker has 2 options. You can run under run C, which is the normal way of running Docker, or you can run it as a kata container, which basically wraps the virtual manager around it. So it gives your containers a little bit extra protection. The software process is quite different than most of the distributions, because the bundles, which are not packages, they're actually combinations of packages. What Intel is trying to solve here is they're trying to prevent libraries from competing with versions. So they are putting all of these RPM packages through something they call the mixer, and that then outputs a bundle. So if you're looking for a package and you don't find it, it's probably because it's inside of a bundle. And the best way to go out and find it is to type the command name for that particular application that you want to run on the terminal command line. It'll tell you which bundle it's in. So if you have, it's a little bit different than some of the ways that we've dealt with things in the past. The software manager also has bundles. They'll look like Tesseract cubes that you can install directly from the software manager through the GUI. And if it doesn't have that, it's a flat pack. So I think the only thing that I didn't have any trouble with it, so I went back and installed it on, I have a laptop that's really impossible to get anything running on. It's an MSI GS65 Stealth, and it doesn't want to run anything. It came right up, no problem at all. Boots in about 3 seconds with it. So I was able to install VPN. I was able to install the stuff I normally install on it. Now, I haven't done the NVIDIA drivers yet, still running on the older ones. But the only thing I'm really concerned about with it is the telemetry. I opted to take it off and did a search under var and found telemetry.socket as a file that was open. So that concerns me a little bit. That I'm going to talk to Intel about that probably next week and ask them what's going on there. Why is there a telemetry socket open? But that's the only comments I'd have. I find the speed of it very good overall.
The bundles of libraries that you spoke of, is that so it has compatibility with different versions of?
That's correct. What they're trying to do, if you run along for a while, you may run into a collision, but because one package wants one version of the library, another package might need a different version.
Right.
So what they're trying to do is to put all of those applications into a bundle, and then they curate that to try to, it minimizes. I won't say time's going to tell, right, how well that works, but it's their approach to try to solve that problem.
I think I read that they have got they've sort of made mention of the fact that they've got so many packages in their repository. Did you run into anything where you didn't find something you were looking
Not
for?
yet. Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I did have to install one RPM package, and you can install RPM packages, but you run the risk of polluting your environment. So just
DJ, I put a link to your YouTube video in the YouTube chat.
oh, thank you, Rocco. And that's all I had. Thank you. It was nice to go back and see it again.
Can I ask you something, DJ?
Go ahead.
Did the socket remain open like through reboots and stuff, or was it?
Yeah, I checked it a couple of times on the machine and it's still present. So
Ooh, okay.
I'm going to send a note to the team and ask them what's going on. Yep.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Jason, how has your week in Linux been?
Well, my week in Linux has been pretty good. I started off trying to install ClearOS on a virtual machine, and like a lot of people here, I ran into the issue where it didn't want to work. I did not go in, investigate, and try to get it to work. I just like, oh, well, I have a spare laptop, so I just put it on the spare laptop and been using it here and there. I've been able to find everything I wanted to install on it, got it all installed. So it's working great. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with it, but it's definitely a nice looking distro, and it is definitely the only issue I had with it was I was so confused like everybody else with the host name at first. I was just like, why is that long string of numbers and stuff instead of what I inputted in. But apparently, I guess it's something I guess you had to change on the in the install and then under the advanced settings. I didn't know that. Messed around with it, tweaked it a little bit using the tweak tool, customized the little desktop things and messed around with it, and everything's going fine so far. If I run into any issues, I'll bring them up next week.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
All right. Paul, how are you, sir?
Yeah, what's up, everybody? I did give it a download and give it a try, and what I found out was that Intel's own 11-year-old laptop, it will not run on that one because it says the extensions are not there. But it is an Intel processor. So I thought that was weird. It's a Core 2 Duo. But yeah, it will not go on there. It gives me extension errors. So that's as far as I got.
Okay.
Is it a UFI BIOS?
No.
Then that is your issue, Paul.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So
Okay.
I gave up on it. Next.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for trying.
Yep.
Okay. Dave, good to see you, sir.
Good evening. For Nate, since it's even green, there's your round to it. So get to
that's
work.
Beautiful. That's
I was
beautiful.
actually given that at a lug meeting. So
did it help you?
I don't know. I haven't gotten around to trying it yet. I threw ClearOS onto a USB, and I have a Toshiba satellite that is Intel CPU with integrated Intel graphics. It's an i5, so it's certainly current enough. And the first time I turned on the machine, it just black screened and did nothing. Powered off, powered it back on. It started up, installed fine. Like Big Pod said, the telemetry defaults to yes, but the thing is, it won't let you install till you actually go to that page and click on yes or no. So you can't just go yes through without actually having to answer that question. So I do give them props for that. I was not aware about the host name being in the advanced options of the installer, so I got it installed, ran an update, and ran my install script to do all the linking and whatnot to bring in my other disks, which changes the host name. And when I rebooted, it would not boot. It said the media was present, but it went looking for a network boot. And so I said, okay, I must have screwed something up somewhere. So I threw the USB back in, the live environment came up, ran the installer again, installed fine, pulled the USB out, well, shut it down, pulled the USB out, restarted it. Same error, media present, but it went looking for a network boot. So I haven't actually had a chance to play around with an installed version. The live version has worked for me, except for that first time when I was actually trying to bring up the boot menu. So that may have caused it a little hiccup. But other than that, as long as I just let it boot naturally to the USB drive, the live environment comes up fine. I've never been a fan of GNOME, but I still want to give it more of a shot. So this week I'm going to go exploring to see about changing the host name during the install and see if that fixes and take that line out of my setup script to see if I can get it to go past the first update.
All right. Well, then we'll look forward to that next week. All right, Shickle.
Hello.
I gave it a shot, and it's pretty quick. That's definitely one thing. They definitely have been working a lot on making sure that everything's as fast as it can possibly be. I would say it's a pretty boring experience in regards to everything else. It's just, it's kind of a simple, straightforward desktop, which makes sense. GNOME is what it is, and you can make it however you want it, via extensions, whatever. In regards to installing it, I got it installed both on a Ryzen plus Vega laptop as well as an Intel laptop. They both worked well.
You actually made mention of the fact that it worked so well on the Ryzen system, right?
Yes, it's pretty quick. I'm actually rather impressed with it. I'm a little jealous of it just because it's faster than anything else that I've used, but it's definitely not going to make me switch anytime soon, but I look forward to what they do in the future.
Eric, my system's a Ryzen system with a GTX 1080 in it, and it works just fine. You know what I got.
I do. I do.
Steve, you said you had not tried that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I was working. I had been working on Voyager Linux, and then I did a couple of videos this week.
Okay.
So
I expect your Clear OS or Clear Linux stream on Monday then, okay?
Okay.
Ricky, how about you? Have you tried Clear Linux?
I've experimented it for just a little bit. I will say that this is indeed, in my personal opinion, the fastest GNOME experience I've ever encountered on any given distribution. To me, the speed of GNOME, this is what GNOME should have been in the first place, but I'll digress. Clear Linux as a whole, I really do like it for its speed and stability. It's got a nice software selection. I use the package manager to search for at least 2 types of software that I was looking for, and I found them. Other than that, very simple, very fast distribution, and that's really all I got to say. Very good.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad it's a good experience. I'm actually excited to know that it's a fast GNOME experience. I've never experienced that before, so this could be a earth shattering for me. I might have something positive to say about GNOME for a change.
It'll blow your mind.
It'll blow my mind. Daniel, how was your week in Linux?
Pretty good. Am I sounding all right?
You sound great.
Okay, cool. I have not had a chance to play around with Clear Linux. I spent the week getting MX19 installed on my main rig. So the goal is now to play with Clear Linux this week. So I'll have something for next week for sure.
All right. Pizza.
I didn't try Clear Linux because I didn't want to install it on my main system because I'm developing Border OS and I'm like almost done with the first beta. So if I accidentally wipe something, I could lose all of that, So, and my other laptop, my ThinkPad, my brother has schoolwork on it. So again, I didn't want my brother to lose his schoolwork. So I don't really have anything I can install it on since I can't really install it in a virtual machine. So
It's only grades.
yeah. But I do want to say that that GNOME is pretty fast if you use vanilla GNOME. But if you use any extensions, then it becomes slow.
Okay.
I just said that because he said that he's never used fast GNOME.
Oh,
So
I think we all got it. I think
That's
we
one
got
thing
it.
I noticed about it is I wanted to install Dash to panel, and I could not find a way to do it. It won't let you do it.
in Clear Linux,
Yes.
did you try installing Firefox and then installing the GNOME integration extension with Firefox?
Yeah, it fails to work.
I know. Then you have to install. I think it's like Chrome, some shell GNOME or
What is
something.
it?
I don't
What is it
do
that you're trying to
Chrome.
install? The Dash what?
He wants to install an extension. Oh, did you try doing it through the GNOME Software Center?
Exactly. That's what I got mine through. I went right through the
Yeah.
software center, installed it, and it works fine.
Yeah. If you couldn't do it through the GNOME website, usually you could do it through the Software Center, which
Mhm.
I didn't
added pretty
try.
recent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it works.
So it should be able to work through the Software Center.
And you could still try.
As you can see, my face is kind of blue right now. That's because that's from the grub screen of Clear Linux and VM. But in GNOME boxes, which is what I always use, I noticed that when I can open the live install, but then when I try and install, it says it doesn't use UEFI. So if someone can tell me how to get UEFI working inside of GNOME boxes, please let me know, because I do want to try this distribution.
VirtualBox,
I don't like very much. It's super slow. So
try
but it does. It will give you the UEFI capability.
Yeah,
I could try VMware.
Well, like DJ
use
Ware
KVM.
said. Well, yeah, DJ Ware said. I mean, he tried it in Vertman with KVM, and it works.
Doesn't GNOME boxes use KVM?
It probably is something other than
Thought it
libvirt
did.
and OVMF that is used for UEFI.
I actually have Vertman installed, so no, I've never opened it before, so I'd have to, Anyways, go on to the next guy.
Okay. Well, yeah, maybe give that a try.
Yeah.
All right. And just in the nick of time, Vince shows up.
He always does.
How's my audio?
You sound good.
Yeah.
Chris.
So Clear Linux. I did give it a go, but I mean, overall, it hasn't been my favorite, so I haven't been able to spend much time on it, but I did install it on my testing laptop. The installation, I installed it or added it to my Solus installation. I added another partition. The install is a bit weird, and I don't know if it's been talked about already. If you wanted to do manual partitioning, you've actually got to label or name the partitions first. So, for example, your EFI partition, you've got to name clear boot. You've got to name your swap clear swap. You've got to name your root clear root before it'll actually recognize it and install it. So that's a bit tricky and a bit different from a lot of other installers. I really liked the way that you could actually choose a lot of different packages that you wanted to install in the advanced options. So, for example, I chose to install the GIMP packages. I chose networking utilities and LibreOffice. I also liked the fact that the FlatHub repos were in there by default, so you didn't have to do any sort of command line magic to get them in there. One of the troubles I did have was, whilst I could watch a lot of YouTube videos on Firefox, when I tried to watch streams, it wouldn't play. It just errored out. So I found out in the Clear Linux forums that you actually need to compile FFmpeg, and I followed the instructions there, and it worked after that. I did have a bit of a fight to get a couple of applications working. For example, Kodi and Remina, which I used to connect to work. I'm still working on Remina. It's still not quite working very well, so I'll report back if I have any luck. And finally, another issue I had was on my laptop, which is an AMD laptop. It had issues with when I closed the lid and suspended the laptop. When I reopened it again, it seemed like the GDM manager wasn't responsive. I could used my mouse and it seemed like the keyboard was working, but I couldn't get to my name. It just showed the screen sort of locked screen, and I couldn't log back in, so I had to like hard reboot the laptop. Look, it's a very fast distro. It boots very fast for sure. It's GNOME runs very well on it, but in comparison, I found Solus Budgie a lot more faster. So that's the last thing I've got a reference with. So there's that. I'll give it more of a chance this week and report back hopefully next week.
Do you feel like, Vince, maybe it's just more focused on a different purpose than general desktop use?
Yeah, I definitely believe so. I did have a thought about, what was Intel's intentions in making a distro, and I understand it's probably more likely to be in the sort of a cloud-based server type of scenario. So take that as it is.
Well, I mean, since there's so many optimizations to make the CPU work better, I feel like it could be a really good distro for gaming, except for the fact that it's not a good day-to-day distro. So if all you're doing was gaming and nothing else, it might be good. But like, if you do other stuff too, like programming, it could be annoying because of the bundle system and stuff like
That's
that.
actually kind of what makes it good. Actually, it's touted as a benefit because it gives you a clean environment that doesn't get constantly tainted by other dependencies. Like, it's actually ideal for programming because you don't have that contamination.
Or just if you do something like, if you're just an average user who wants to do gaming and you wanted a fast distro, it's not a Linux for new users. I could not throw this on, like, if you have a son who does gaming, you can't just throw it on his PC and let him figure it out himself.
I think I would characterize it much like I look at Fedora, where it's a workstation environment, more so than a general use desktop environment. Sure, you can extend it out and make Fedora into one, but by default, it's very much focused on, that core workstation concept. And maybe that's what Clear Linux is shooting for, is more of that sort of very defined workstation role.
I was able to put Steam on it and actually game on it really well.
Yeah, I think that they're making it easy enough for folks to extend out, but I guess my point is that, like, Vince is saying, that maybe it is more focused for developers, maybe it's more focused on that use case, and they make it so that you can extend it, but by what they're looking at, what they're focusing on is maybe that sort of core stability.
I personally thought and think it's more meant for enterprise and workstation use than general desktop, because all the things like automating the installs, it's quite easy. It is all of it is made so easy for administrators to quickly set up a bunch of machines, compared to normal installs, which are in many cases a lot manual, and for that not automatable.
Well, for what it's worth, I mean, we have a pretty mixed group here of people who are looking at it from a desktop perspective or gaming or all these different things. And it doesn't sound like anybody had any really difficult issues. Paul had issues installing on an older laptop, and, we kind of established that maybe they're not focused on older hardware. So even though it might be more focused, it seems like they've actually done a pretty good job of making it general enough that a group like us can look at this and not have major issues in general.
I've often looked at it as kind of a reference distribution, in a sense that it's like a theoretical maximum, really extracting everything you can out of your hardware, newer hardware, evidently, without having all the, they don't have the CPU mitigations in, so it's not really a realistic distribution necessarily there, but it's like a reference. Like, this is what theoretical maximum efficiency could be, if with all the stops pulled out. That's kind of how I've looked at it.
Yeah, and I'll throw out there too that they are also working on hardware like their GPUs, graphics cards and things like that. And I wonder if maybe in a scientific community or a that sort of environment, this is going to be a strength for them to say, look at the power you can get out of a workstation, and oh, by the way, we have these graphics cards that can do the computing, AI, that kind of stuff. And of course, they're going to be very well supported on Clear Linux. I have no substance behind that, but it seems to make sense from their perspective. I mean, why else would they be doing this, really? Like Nate says, is this just a technical exercise, or what's the focus?
I mean, regardless, I think it's good that they have this as a, even if it's just a reference or like a technical experiment, or to really flesh out things internally. I think it's a good distribution, a good platform for that. And maybe for other, maybe that's their intent too, is to really use it for other, technical referencing for your hardware, and so forth. It would make sense based on the kind of bare bones nature it seems to be, as far as no extra fluff. And then also having those library packages that DJ was talking about, that would also make sense. So you can test and verify applications under an ideal condition.
Well, and having those bundles would make it very easy to a repeatable process. Right? You roll that bundle out, exactly what you're going to get.
One thing I was going to ask, Nate, are we sure that the mitigations are disabled? Because on their website, they seem to focus a lot on security. Like on the front page, they tout security and whatnot. If they actually really do disable the mitigations, that seems like that'd be kind of misleading.
Well, I could be wrong. I've been wrong many, many, many times, and so I could be wrong about that. But my understanding was that the mitigations were pulled out so they could get maximum speed out of it. But I could be wrong on that. So disregard everything I said previously.
No, they are.
So I actually heard. I heard people. Someone else said that before. So yeah, but I saw all the security content on their website. So I just thought that was kind of strange.
Security is a very wide sort of situation. So yeah, so they can call like this, like they could just say the software sources are secure, but like the CPU might not be. So it's kind of a bit of a vague and difficult to pinpoint claim.
I do understand that does make sense, but it just seems like that if you're going to disable mitigations, which is kind of a big deal, that maybe security wouldn't be something that you'd be like shining a spotlight on as a pro, as an advantage.
I definitely agree. It's a little weird.
That's why they never say what happens in an Intel CPU stays in an Intel CPU.
Well played.
Okay, has anybody else tried to install the NVIDIA drivers into this?
Chickle
has.
Yeah, did you run into any issues?
Well, yeah, there was one. Well, I didn't have any issues per se, but there was a part that kind of freaked me out for a minute, because there's a part where the instructions tell you to do this to remove the shipped driver that comes with it, the open source one. And you reboot the machine, you get a blank screen with a cursor, and you put your password in. At that point, you should know where the package is that you downloaded from NVIDIA that you need to run.
Yeah, that part's a little bit tricky. And the thing is like, if that's the machine that you're using for the instructions, you can't use it to actually complete it. It's a little difficult. I had my phone open next to me. It was not fun.
Well, I happened to put the package I got from NVIDIA in a unique spot so I could use the command line real quick to run it. And then I rebooted and I had, ta-da, whole new screens with drivers.
All right. Well, go ahead, Rocco.
I was just going to say that the last thing I'll say about Clear Linux is I will totally agree that it's probably not for like your everyday average desktop user. It's more for a corporate thing, kind of like a Red Hat type thing. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll table it there for this week, and we'll follow up with folks either that haven't tried it this week or that have some more information next week. And, it seems like everybody's doing fairly well with Clear Linux, so be interested to see folks make progress.
It is a worthy tinker toy to play with.
Yeah. Well, it's something different. It's a different take, right? And I certainly appreciate that whenever I try a different distribution that isn't just, hey, here's the base and here's another desktop environment with a couple little tweaks. Maybe the theme's different. This is actually a re-envisioning of a lot of things, right? They've changed substantial portions of what you would consider, the distribution. So, so that is interesting. Absolutely. What do you
All
say,
right.
Rocco?
So this past week, I wanted to get your take on it about Linux Mint. And Eric, I know you've talked about Linux Mint before, but this past week, Linux Unplugged did a whole episode on Linux Mint. And they hadn't done an episode in, I think, 100 episodes on Linux Mint itself. And they had, maybe mentioned some of the reasons why. But I guess I want to get your guys' take on it. Do we overlook Linux Mint because it's the old steady operating system or distro that's always there and always works and doesn't change a whole lot? Does it get that shell? I mean, they come out with updates, they come out with releases, and like this past release wasn't like a huge major release, but it had some nice things, including fractional scaling and stuff like that. So Eric, do we overlook Linux Mint because it's the old steady?
I think so in a lot of ways, because a couple of things. I think one, folks tend to look at it as a beginner distro, and then as they move into Linux and maybe, try different things that they find, I guess, we've talked here about trying different things and the excitement or interest in that. And certainly Linux Mint is a slow moving system by design. It's based on an LTS, version. The releases themselves do not see a lot of changes in things like theming or the tool sets themselves. I mean, when I look at 19.3, I because I'm a Cinnamon user, I see some changes that they've added. I mentioned earlier to Rocco, one of the standouts for me personally is using it on a laptop. They've added the ability under the touchpad settings to automatically disable the touchpad when you plug in an external mouse. Seems like a small change, and it is a small change, but it's one of those quality of life changes, and that's exactly the type of thing they focus on. The system being very stable, not changing dramatically between versions, because the last thing they want to do is alienate their users and have them log into a new version and have it be radically different in some way. And then to just make small incremental quality of life improvements. And so that's exactly what we see. 19.3 was about, hardware enablement and, a newer kernel and newer packages in some cases. But again, it's based on an LTS release. So until they rebase on 2004, you're not going to see a dramatic change in all of that. And I still do not hesitate to recommend Mint as a user-friendly distribution, and whether that means it's user-friendly for a newer user that's coming from a different operating system or just user-friendly in general. If you have a system that you just want to have that experience, that cohesive, well thought out, well put together experience that just works whenever you use it. I mean, Mint is just really hard to fault because of that focus.
Well, it seems to me that when there's new distros that come out, or say new versions of whether it be Elementary or Zorin or Ubuntu itself, we're all eager to try it out. We're all like trying to install it right away. But when there's a new Linux Mint out, we're like, huh. I mean, am I wrong or?
No, you're not. You're not. And it really doesn't get a lot of coverage. It doesn't get a lot of play, but they have a substantial user base. They have a lot of people that use it. They have a lot of people that contribute. So they're doing well financially. They, they are the slow and steady and just continue to keep that momentum going forward. They have their ideals of what their system should be. A lot of people seem to agree with them and like it. And yeah, and I agree. If you're not interested in Mint, that not a lot is going to change. So when a new version comes out, if it's not something you're interested in, you probably aren't going. You might read the release notes page or the announcement, and you're going to see again they're just small changes. And for the most part, I think a lot of people again just discount it because they see it either as a beginner distro or they just don't really want to run Cinnamon. But I'll tell you that, their Mate version is pretty fantastic. They do, and it's consistent. It looks exactly like the Cinnamon version. And so they strive to give that continuity and that familiar experience to people.
Yep. Well, I want everybody's opinion on this, so jump in. What do you guys think?
I'm a big fan of Mint as well, and I do recall last year there was some criticism laid onto them about Clem and the team not sort of being out there enough and advocating for the distro enough. And I think at one point in time, Joe Collins even sort of was going to join them to try and advocate for them more. So whilst, yes, it's a fantastic distro, I think part of the problem is also that they don't, push themselves out enough.
Colin, what do you think?
Well, I was a big Linux Mint user for ages, and if I really don't know what to put on and I'm changing Linux Mint, I don't know why that is just classed as a user-friendly distro when there's so many other user-friendly distros out there. It probably has the most familiar desktop workplace that anyone could really jump on and use, and it just works. And you never, and from my experience, I have installed it on many desktops and laptops for people, and I never ever get anyone coming back saying I've got an issue, right? People just use it and it just works, and that's from a realistic point of view. And it's one of the ones you can just really rely on. And yes, they do update slowly. They just make those little incremental updates that just refine the desktop just that little bit more. So I remember when I was using it, when it sort of first came out, you'd like to have this and like to have that. And they're slowly but surely putting those things in place and starting to look better and better and function even better. They've improved the speeds and all that. And I think Linux Mint is just one of those distros. I think anyone can use it. I think maybe even a developer. I don't know. I'm not a developer, but I'd have to think that everything that you need to develop could be done on Linux Mint. I don't see why only that is classed as a user friendly. So many other user friendly distros out there. So I think it's overlooked. Definitely.
You alluded to something that I think is actually an important part of this conversation, and Stephen Anderson in the YouTube chat also made the point that if you look at the roots of Mint, it came out of the difficulties of dealing with codecs and proprietary software in Ubuntu back in the day. And so that was sort of their offshoot, was to make that easier for desktop users to get up and running and to have a system that, had all of those things without having to mess with, repositories and things like that. So their premise is making it easy for a user to get started. And Stephen's comment and Colin alluding to, there are so many different options today that there weren't when Mint started. You've got, you mentioned Zorin, you mentioned some of these other ones, and those all will give you that same experience. And so Mint maybe isn't seen as being as, I guess, interesting or useful as it once was, because it gave you all of those things where very few other things did. You had Debian, you had, other distros that made it very difficult to get that stuff up and running, and Mint made that very easy. And like I said, now you have all these other distros that are kind of doing the same thing in a lot of ways. I still contend that Mint has the best experience in terms of getting started, setting up that the welcome screen they give you. Hey, you should set up snapshots for your system. Here's why that's important. Hey, you should set up your local repository, your local mirror, and it takes you sort of through those steps of getting started in a system. And for again, for newer users, those are things they're not going to know right away. You scroll down, there's a firewall setting.
Yep.
You scroll down, there's a package setting. It just kind of steps you through all of those things in a very methodical, well thought out way.
if I could elaborate just a little bit more, I think Linux Mint, they listen to their users. They really do listen to their users, and they don't change things too much because the users would be in absolute panic. I mean, just recently they made a change where you can have your traditional classic looking, what's the name down the bottom, your panel,
Your
or you can
task your
change
task manager, whether it's icons or the
Yeah, and then they also had it where you can have the modern looking one, which sort of acts a little bit like the way Windows 10 works. So they really do focus on these little things that the users don't want changed too much. And I think the other thing that we could probably say why we don't focus too much on Linux Mint with their updates is because they remain on the long-term version until it changes to the next long-term version. So they do their 3 updates on a main version on a long-term, and then they do their another major update with the Ubuntu long-term support again. So they do all their changing on the long-term support, which is not what they used to do back in the day. They used to just do the updates with the latest interim updates, and now they don't do that. They just remain on the long-term support.
Yeah,
So,
they always historically had issues with upgrading between versions too. That was always a problem.
That's correct. That's why they stay a lot more stable, and they just make small changes here and there, and then they probably make a lot more bigger changes come the next long-term support. So they really do like the stability and familiarity as well for the users as well. And like you said, Eric, all the way they have it set up when you first start just makes it so much easier for users to get themselves up and running, and also with the backups as well. So
yeah. Penguin, you had a point?
Yeah, well, the thing is, the thing about Linux Mint I like is you went into this about the welcome screen showing you exactly how to set everything up. Heck, I even use that if I set it up because often I forget what to turn on snapshots or whatever. But also, it's very, very easy for someone to get started if they have never, ever used Linux before whatsoever. It is a great beginner distro because you have the codecs at your fingertips. You have all this. You don't have to go and hunt down everything. The thing is, a lot of us as power users or very, very experienced users, it gets overlooked because it's already set up, and we like to go and tinker off and get everything working a certain way, where it's all done for you on Linux Mint. And if you go and you try and change a lot of stuff on Linux Mint, a lot of times you can break something. I've broken Linux Mint several times going back and trying a different desktop environment that isn't necessarily supported. I mean, I did i3 on my mainline PC that runs Linux Mint right now, and man, I had a headache doing that. So a lot of us like to tinker, and that's why a lot of us overlook Linux Mint. At least that's what my theory is.
It's a fair point, right? You have the Mint has a presentation they're giving you, right? An experience, an environment, whatever, and they kind of expect you to stay within that. Yeah, you can fight it a little bit if you push too hard. Good. Pizza. I'm sorry, Dave and Vash had their hands up.
Oh,
go ahead, Dave.
The way I view it, it's kind of like people said, it's a perception issue. Just like people say Arch is this horrible, unstable behemoth that, the AUR is, you shall not return. And that Gentoo just is for the total geekheads.
Well, those things are true.
Linux Mint has the reputation of being the training wheels of the Linux community. And so people, a lot of people don't take it seriously because they think they're above it. And instead of just, use what works for you. And so it comes down to perception, and too many people get caught up in kind of like Derek on DistroTube did a video this past week on why all the hate on Ubuntu. And he was talking about people who think that Ubuntu is, for beginners. And you get this kind of elitism of anybody who's been in, or a lot of people who've been in Linux for a while, who, think they're above the training wheel distros. And instead of looking at how good and solid they actually are in their own right, beyond just being simple for even new users, and how much work it takes to make a distro that is that simple and safe for new users.
Dave,
Yeah.
did you see the pot I stirred up there in the comments?
Yes.
Well, and I agree with that point, and I think it goes back to what Tony and Dan were saying about enforcing an 8-character password, or Ubuntu switching to snaps for Chromium, or there are certain decisions that distros make that I think once you've used Linux long enough, you sort of have this, just you feel you have the right to do whatever you want to the system, and when a distro maybe makes a change that you don't agree with, then all of a sudden that kind of sticks in your craw, and you say, well, maybe this isn't the distro for me. And Mint definitely has some of those roadblocks if you want to go a little further than what they're giving you. It's not that you can't do it, but there are definitely times, I maybe haven't broken it quite as bad as Penguin has, but I've definitely run into some issues where that was not as easy as it would have been on Arch or on another distro. So anyway, Vash.
Well, then Eric,
Sorry, go ahead, Penguin.
what I would suggest in that is, if you want to outstretch further, that you back your stuff up and go to Ubuntu, because it's a little bit easier. Everything else is in the repositories for Ubuntu, whereas Linux Mint doesn't support it, and more often than not, they block that installation for you. So I would suggest, if you want to do something more with Linux Mint but want to keep the same base, you switch to Ubuntu at that point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Vash, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to kind of point to before. I don't know. For me, it's not really a perception thing. It's just the point where I want to tinker more than Linux Mint really is useful for. They do have I don't know if I'd call it an issue or not, but it's, it can be a problem for some, where the way the priorities for the repositories are set up. And that can be, an issue if you're trying to do anything outside of the main stuff that they have. So I think it's stuff like that. And then also, I don't think that the people that are really looking for the distro updates, and the people that are looking to go and try the next hottest thing, are looking at Mint, because there really isn't as much change. 20, when they get to 20, then maybe we'll see something a bit different. But, like we've talked about, it's, still based on LTS. They're not doing major changes. So I just don't think I don't think there's really a lot there that people are going to get excited about, just because, it is kind of all just refining everything. And if you're looking to do what Linux Mint is set up to do, it's a great thing. And I still recommend it for new people, because I really like the layout of Cinnamon Desktop, and I think it really helps people get comfortable with just how everything else works in Linux. So
yeah, it's a fair point. Absolutely. Pizza, go ahead.
I personally don't use Ubuntu because of some of they don't listen to their users very often. I feel like, because they're trying to push snaps down our throats, and a lot of people don't like that. And that's the reason I don't use Ubuntu, because of the whole snap thing. But Linux Mint seems to take Ubuntu stupidity and just remove it. And that's one thing I like about Linux Mint. I feel like Linux Mint is, for distros, I feel like Linux Mint is just a really good distro for me in that aspect, because of the anti-snap thing that they have. But I personally think that Linux Mint is the best operating system you can get right now. That doesn't mean it's my favorite, but I think it's the best OS of all time. I go as far to say it's the best OS of all time, because it's so simple. It's good if you're a power user, as long as you are fine with using an LTS build. It's also good if you're someone just trying to get work done, or if you're like my mom trying to file her taxes. It's really easy to use with its software center. It's one of the only Debian software centers that work. It's a familiar interface with the Cinnamon desktop. Just everything about it just makes it really easy to use. It's definitely the most easy to use operating system, and with the powerful Linux kernel in comparison to the Windows kernel, it is definitely the OS that I would recommend to someone using computers for the first time, because it's just so polished in comparison to a lot of other distros, and you never have issues with codecs and stuff like that. And because of that, in my book, I consider Linux Mint the best OS of all time. Even though it's not my favorite, I still prefer Arch because of the newer packages, like some of the packages on Ubuntu LTS, especially at the end of an LTS cycle, where we are going to have a new one in 2 months. Some of those are really ancient. So, but other than that, I feel like it's definitely underrated. The team has put a lot of work into it, and that's why I think it's one of the best operating systems.
Well, let's be fair here. Pizza, you mentioned about the canonical and some of the things you don't like about it, but about snaps and flat packs, that's a subjective opinion as far as whether they're stupid or not. To make comments like, Ubuntu is stupidity or whatever. I mean, if Linux Mint decided tomorrow they were going to put snaps in, you know what I mean? It's a subjective opinion, I would say.
Well,
and I have to say that they're not shoving it down your throats, because I don't use snaps or flat packs, and I have no issues getting all the software I want on Ubuntu derivatives.
Right.
Well, it came to the point now where I can't get Chromium on there without using a snap or using older like Debian repositories.
You need to look into why they put Chromium into a snap. They actually had a logical, very well laid out reason for why they did that. There was packaging issues with Chromium and some of the libraries it required. There's some issues. And so it made it easier in order to maintain Chromium effectively on Ubuntu for them to use it in a snap. So just go ahead and look into the history
Nate,
on that.
you have your auto volume leveler on Zoom.
Yeah.
Zoom.
Well,
Yeah, because you start out wicked high and then go way down.
The thing is, if you like snaps, you can still install those on Linux Mint, but they don't try and push snaps by default. And Flatpaks, they do a little bit. However, I really like how in Ubuntu, for example, if you open up the GNOME Software Center and try and install something, it will always install the snap by default, even if it's in the main repo. Whereas Linux Mint, the way it does that is it has two versions in it, one flat hub and one not flat hub. And that way it's way easier to choose between the two. So if I want a flat pack, like I always prefer a native package before I use a flat pack. But if I want a flat pack, I still have the option. And
But Pizza,
that's why
I guess
really
what I'm
like how
saying
they
is
do
with
that.
this whole subjective thing is, in the same way you're talking about snaps are installed by default in Ubuntu.
Yeah.
If you go to do a package, in the same way, if you install a PPA in Mint and that package is in the Mint repository, they're going to install the Mint repository package first. So they both have things that maybe you don't like or don't care for. All I'm saying is we should probably just, say, hey, we don't like it. We don't like that, rather than say, man, that's stupid.
Especially taking into account that most of what Mint is comes directly from Ubuntu. So
Well, what I'm trying to say is a lot of Ubuntu users don't like snaps, and a lot of them miss Unity and stuff like that, whereas Mint seems to always listen to their community on major decisions, and
So
that
I
like
can
about it.
guarantee you that with any project, you're going to find users that are unhappy with any change that is made. The thing is, this isn't unique to Ubuntu. Mint has made changes that their users haven't been happy with in the past. This just happens with every project. So you may not like those changes, and that's totally fine to express, but projects are going to take the steps that they think is necessary for their project, and there's always going to be someone who's unhappy about it. It's not like Ubuntu's the only one making these kinds of decisions. It's not that they're ignoring their users. It's just that they have so many users, it's impossible to please all of them.
Well,
Correct.
Ubuntu also has to make money because it's ran by a corporation.
We're going to move on from this topic. All right. Sorry.
Can I ask a really odd question? Am I the only one here that only uses software centers as an absolute last resort to try and get software on
you're
their
not.
system?
You're not, Dave.
No,
And
you're
I was having the same thought where if you use Mint and you only ever use the software center, you probably wouldn't ever run into an issue of breaking the system. If you're trying to use PPAs and you're trying to like wedge things in there, I think that's where some of us have run into those issues.
Because I never use software centers. I immediately go to the command line.
Yeah.
But that's you and me and then a couple other
Right.
people here.
I was just curious if I was the only one.
No, you're not. You're not. I never use them.
I think you're the only one, Dave.
Well, I do.
Well, the thing
depending
about
on-
okay, just go ahead, Pizza.
I was gonna say I use the software center if it's a good software center like PAMAC or the Solus one or something. But if it's a bad software center like the GNOME software center, then I avoid it.
All right, before we move on, Jason, you wanted to get in.
Well, yeah, I'm the probably the newest user here amongst everybody, and as everybody was talking about how Linux Mint is the distro for new users, and well, that's the one I actually use right now. But I didn't start off on Linux Mint. I started off with I used Zorin, I used Emacs, I used a bunch of different distros, and when I got to Mint, it was the one I stuck with because it was the one that to me was the best looking distro. It worked the best, and it was it worked basically. I didn't have to do much to configure it or anything like that. It just was installed it. I downloaded the software that I wanted, and it worked. And as far as the software center goes, even with me as a fairly new user, I primarily use the command line to do my installations as well. Occasionally, I'll go into something that I can't get to install correctly through the command line. I'll go in and see if it's in the store. But 9 out of 10 times, it's the command line. But I definitely agree that Linux Mint is the for me anyway as a new user was the one that I went with after testing out 4 or 5 different distros, and I landed on that. Been on it for about about 2.5 months now, using that as my main Linux distro. I do have other distros on laptops that I play with to to continue to learn, but Linux Mint is the top one as a new user, as a new user.
Well, and hearing that from you, and then also, Colin mentioned it, I mentioned it, that entire experience where it's just so well put together. I think that's what you're saying, and you recognize that right away, and I think that's what we have a hard time sometimes, as people who have been using Linux for a long time, because we have our own opinions. You came into this sort of trying a couple things, and then you found Mint and said, wow, this all makes sense, and it all seems like people thought of the things that maybe would make sense to me. And that's why I continue to say that Mint is the best for that, not first, but just that full experience of like, hey, somebody really put some thought into this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's basically the one of the first ones I ran into that seemed really, really polished, I guess is the word that you can use. It was just everything was there, everything looked great. I was able to customize it, to tinker with this, to tinker with that. Not a power user, and I wasn't trying to break anything or anything like that, but I was just trying to get it to look and to work and to get the software that I wanted. And it was just pretty much click, 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 type, command line, do this, do that, done. And it had a huge resource out there for it too, because it's, since it's based on Ubuntu, it had documents everywhere where you could find if you needed help with the command line or something like that when you're starting out, you just go to the forums, go here, go there, and everything was there. Some of these other distros like ClearOS, I had a hard time finding some information in ClearOS to figure out, how to use their command line basically. But with Linux Mint, it was straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Just to add to that note, I actually have a Mint USB stick here, and this is the hard drive. This isn't an ISO. And it's full of tools with Mint on it. So if a computer breaks down, I stick this in. I can write documents, save stuff, all kinds of things. And it makes a really good tool. And anytime I feel like I'm missing Mint, I can plug this in. I also have Mint on my TV computer out in the living room. So, it's there. I can't run away from it.
It's a known entity, right?
Yes,
You know, Dan,
it's a household tool.
right, Dan. If you have a new system and you just wanted it to work the way you know it's going to work, yeah.
It's basically old trusty.
Yeah.
Earlier on in my Linux journey, I used, I think it was Linux Mint 17.3. That was my daily driver for like a solid 10 months or so with the XFCE desktop. So I kind of became familiar with the ins and outs of it. And it kind of made me more interested in the rest of the, the ecosystem that Linux has around it. So definitely a bit of a soft spot there. I don't like everything they do, but at the same time, they gave me kind of like a nice little stepping stone. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we had some other things to talk about. Something that I was excited about was that Plasma 5.18 was released, and this is an LTS version, which is, going to be what's in 2004 for Kubuntu. And I've been using it on Neon and on Kubuntu. So Backports has 5.18 in there. So if you run a 1910, you can already have 5.18 on 1910. And from my experience, I've found a few little things. I'm actually going to make a video on, they've changed the way you sort of lock widgets and interact with adding widgets and panels and things like that. Not substantially, it's just a small change, but it could be something that kind of throws people off, whether you do that or not. But otherwise, it's more, we talked about Mint sort of being, evolutionary, not revolutionary. And I would say that Plasma is kind of the same way. They do a lot of frequent updates, but those updates tend to be smaller, sort of incremental changes to the system. So I've spent a lot of time with it. I'm using Kubuntu right now with it. I've been using it for, probably 2 weeks now. I don't know, has anyone else had a chance to test it out, play around with it? Any thoughts on it?
I've been busy with the Clear Linux.
I've got Kubuntu on my main rig and my main laptop, and it's the updates went through flawlessly, and it's been running fine. It's the first time that I actually had KDE Frameworks upgrade where my desktop would actually shut down afterwards, and I didn't have to shut down through the terminal. Because a lot of times that for some reason when it updates but it's still running, I would have to shut down through the terminal. Then when I restarted, it would run fine. But this was the first one. It updated, and I hit shut down through the power button, and it shut right down. No issues.
And this is the one where they removed the hamburger menu in the top right corner.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
That's the big thing to me.
Yeah, they added an emoticon or emoji selector. Again, it's little things like that. They've made some updates to the way the notifications work. It's all just sort of, and if you read through the This Week in KDE by Nate, he does a really good job of, not that Nate, the other Nate, does a great job of covering in gory detail all of the things they do. But for highlights, I wouldn't say there are a tremendous amount of changes, but that's little things. The control panel, the system settings, it's easier to find something than it was before. Not earth shattering, but it makes life a little better. So I'm surprised. I guess we don't have a tremendous amount of KDE Plasma lovers here. Never seeing a lot of heads shaking though.
I tried it and it wasn't quite to my liking. I guess with my Mint testing here and stuff like that, I got on Cinnamon and I quite like the Cinnamon. I played around with XFCE. I like that, but I haven't yet to really get into the Plasma and actually enjoy it.
I've been messing with it, but I don't really typically dive a whole lot into the settings and all that because I've kind of got it set how I want it now. So I've been using it because it's here in Arch, but I haven't really, done anything special with the new one.
Well, maybe it's like Mint in that regard. People don't pay attention because it doesn't change as substantially. So fair enough. Pizza, you get your hand up.
Yeah. So I've been Actually really excited for both of the last two Plasma releases because Plasma 5.17 added it so that Breeze obeys your Breeze colors, which means Breeze GDK, I mean, obeys your Breeze colors, which means you can customize how a lot of GDK applications look if you're using Breeze GDK and their color scheme and stuff. And that was an awesome feature. Well, with Plasma 5.18, one of my biggest issues with Plasma was that client-side decorations from GNOME applications and things looked horrible on Plasma. However, Plasma 5.18 finally now natively supports client-side decorations in Kwin. Before, I'd have to install like GDK-no CSD or GDK-mushrooms in order to get it looking good. But now that Plasma finally natively supports CSDs, I no longer have to do that. So just that feature alone made Plasma a way more usable desktop for someone who uses apps from the GNOME ecosystem frequently, like me.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You're right. And I tested it on, I think, like gedit and that kind of stuff. And yeah, so in 5.17, it didn't have the compositing and the shadows. It didn't have the grab handles were, the borders weren't very easy to grab. There were just some difficulties using those CSD applications. And yeah, it's much smoother now than it had been. And Jason, you mentioned it is different enough if you're used to Cinnamon or used to some other desktop. There's a lot of features, a lot of settings, and it can be KDE's sort of blessing and curse is that it's so configurable. On one hand, if you enjoy it and you want to change things, you can change just about anything you want. And but for a lot of people, that's bothersome because you can change everything you want. And depending on the distro that's putting out their version of Plasma, it can be delivered in any number of states, different keyboard shortcuts, different layouts, different, single click, double click, all these things can be different based on how someone packages it. And so I think at some point you'll probably get to get there where you'll want to look at it and maybe see the differences and have maybe a deeper understanding. And it kind of, for me, I'm between Plasma and Cinnamon because those are my two sort of favorites because they both present the desktop in a very familiar way and all of that. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point you looked at it and gave it another try.
Probably. I am quite the tinkerer. I like to just mess around with stuff, but probably won't have it on a main system anytime soon. I might have it on download one of our when we do one of the distro challenges or something like that. Maybe download a Plasma version of something and then tinker with it then. But as for now, it's going to be the Mint Cinnamon.
Well, like we talked about last week, you take it in as it's comfortable for you. There's no reason to jump in and make yourself lost or uncomfortable. So, Chris, welcome, sir. How are you this evening?
Still muted there. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Well, the Daniel had his hand up before I did, but
oh, sorry, Daniel.
I'll make this real brief. The fact is that I really enjoyed Plasma and KDE. The thing is, I kept hearing how configurable it was, and I couldn't figure out how to configure it. It wasn't until I started playing around with the dot files and playing around with tiling managers and stuff like that that I figured out, oh, okay, this is how you add a panel. This is how you do it. I could not find any resource that would tell me how do I build a screen on KDE so I can make it look like something that I want it to look like rather than what was coming off of whatever distro I was using. But again, I'm very user driven, and my users were, still turning away because they still thought Linux was some complex thing that they didn't have time to learn and stuff like that. And that's why I switched over to Cinnamon for the desktops that I use at the museum here, is because it already looks very much like Windows, and they're not as scared of it now. And but I mean, if I had a chance to play around with it and make KDE look more like what Cinnamon is doing, or even like what Solus was doing and stuff like that, looking very much like a Windows Start menu was is my goal. I just haven't had time to play around with it. So,
Gotcha. Well, funny enough, you mentioned resources for Plasma, and Rocco, back in the day, that was a big focus of his channel. Was he spent a lot of time just digging in and looking at different pieces of Plasma and like, how do you configure this and how do you configure that? Because I will make the criticism that the KDE documentation is kind of all over the place. Some of it is very good and up to date, and some of it is very old and not up to date, and not very clear. So Rocco, for many, I don't know, he had dozens of videos on Plasma, right?
Whole series on each area. And I mean, that's how many settings are in there. You can do a whole series on just like desktop appearance or something like that. So, yeah. But see, one of KDE's greatest strength is that you can get to each setting multiple different ways. And that's also its weakness. You can get to settings multiple different ways. So it gets confusing.
I'm going to go. Bye.
All right. See you, Pizza. Daniel.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like I've played around with KDE before, and I think they do a phenomenal job, and it's a great desktop operating. It's a great desktop environment. Plasma is awesome. And some of the other stuff that they work on, like the KDE Connect stuff, is really cool. Just like Rocco was saying, like for someone like me, like all of that configuration, like I love the idea of choice. And like in many areas of life, the idea of choice is great. But then you get it, and if you're someone like me, once you get hit with all that choice, it takes a lot of discipline to not let that choice get in the way of the stuff that you have to actually get done. Right.
Yeah.
So I've actually gotten to the point where I like, for my main work rigs, like I just want minimalist environments because I'm like ADD, man. Like I just get too distracted with all the bells and whistles. Like, and I love tinkering with it, but like I'll never get anything done if I have that stuff installed.
Daniel, that is so true. Like if I install a KDE Plasma distro, I will spend more time just playing around and just messing with settings that I don't really even need to do than getting anything done. I can install a GNOME distro and I won't touch anything. And I can install a Plasma and I will just go nuts and crazy and try to adjust everything, which is stupid.
I feel like I'm the opposite way.
Well, that's the thing about KDE is that you can customize literally everything about it. But the thing is, yeah, I will just sit there and play with it because I consider that fun. I'll never get anything done. Also, the thing about also KDE is that a lot of new users tend to get lost in those options. That is the biggest complaint I hear about new users trying to use KDE is they're like, I can't even get the dang thing configured right because I get lost because you have like 6 bajillion options that you can choose from.
That's when you direct them to a YouTube channel that has settings videos.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, and then also
exactly.
That's the opportunity for someone like we've seen with Farron, where he can, like Rocco said, you can call out those panels and those settings in through welcome screens and things like that. So that's an opportunity for someone like Farron to boil that down to here's the settings for themes and here's the settings for your desktop and stuff like that. So I think the opportunity is there for someone to make it a little more focused, because if I had to say, if characterize KDE, it's sort of all things to all people, but not focused in a way that makes sense to everybody. So, yeah.
Good Ricky, point. You wanted to say something.
Basically, I wanted to say something about Plasma. From what I've heard, 5.18 is looking really good. But a question has been bugging me for a little while concerning what's gonna be beyond 5.18 and 5.18. The thing that I want to know is what else could they do to Plasma next? I mean, what's one idea that they have not even implemented into Plasma yet?
I don't know from a structural standpoint, right? I mean, I think it could be that focused approach. It could be something. So if you look at Nate's team, the improvement team, and what they were doing over the last 18 months before, I mean, it's not officially there anymore, but they continue to carry on. It was really to solve those paper cut issues. It was to go in and where there was a bug that wasn't being addressed, or where something wasn't clear, wasn't put together in a very cohesive way. And that's really what they've done. So if you were to look back at like 5.12, or like back before they really started a lot of that change, you would see that it was much less polished than it is today. They've done, and if you follow those This Week in KDE release notes, that's exactly what they're doing, is focusing on, here's the bugs, here's the improvements, and here's the features.
I think one thing, Ricky, they haven't done that they should do, and I've said it before, is they should hide some of the settings. They should have a simple settings area, and they should have where you have just basic settings of what you need to change, and then there's an advanced settings where you just click a button and you can see every setting.
Exactly, because on my channel, I've been saying this for the longest time, and a lot of other Linux enthusiasts said as well. The biggest gripe about Plasma is people get lost in the settings so easily. If they can somehow minimize the settings to just a few settings, then boom, fixed.
This may not be the best analogy, but if you guys have ever used Plex and you're setting up the back end of it, they have just a standard set of functionality, and then they have a little link that says advanced. And then when you click that, you've got a bunch more settings there. So if you're a user that needs to change something specific, or, then all of a sudden now, here's every option I could ever possibly want. But here's the 10 that someone's probably likely going to use in every case. And maybe that's something they can focus on, is what are the things that people actually need to change in their system? Are they really going to go in and I would say theming is still a bit of a bugaboo for me, because it's like you've got the overall theme, and then you've got colors, and then you've got icons, and they're all separate things. And it's overwhelming, because it's like, well, what setting is that? Is that the window decorations, or is that the,
Well, that's what I would say, is you put the overall look and feel in the regular simple settings, and everything else goes in advanced.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Right.
One other thing that I think can get lost in there sometimes is just sometimes what the setting is called, because it doesn't always make sense what you're even looking for.
Yeah, and that's where they've made the search a little bit easier in the control panel. Vince or Dave, I'm not sure who had their hand up first.
Vince did.
You sure, Dave?
Oh, let's not argue now, then.
Okay. No, one of the probably biggest bugbears I have with Plasma, and I've tried it in a few different implementations in a few different distros, is, like somebody said, it is implemented a bit differently in one distro to another. And so I would just really love a functionality of being able to just export all the settings that you've made in one distro and then use it in the next one. I think that would be a very, very simple change that could be made to make it much more easier to use, especially if you have it set up so nicely in one place. You can use it somewhere else as well.
Dave?
The one feature I would like, I went looking for it today, actually, in Kubuntu, and didn't find it. So it may be there. I just don't know where to find it. But dynamic virtual desktops, like in GNOME, that will automatically add. I couldn't find a way to set that up in Kubuntu. If it exists in Plasma, I don't know where in the settings it is.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
But not on my main rig, because I have set desktops on that, because I have the apps start on specific screens on specific desktops. But on my main laptop, which only has one screen, I'd like to be able to just have a virtual desktop, and if I want to shunt something off, then have it just automatically add them as I dump them off. So I'd like that feature, but if they don't do it, it's not a make or break for me.
Yeah. Nate.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
Have you ever tried to adjust sound? Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Can export your settings, and I do this. I actually export my settings and I import it to the next machine all the time. There's actually a place you can save your settings to file, and it's really easy to do. And actually, really, the reason, besides the technical advantages of Plasma, the reason that I like Plasma is because of those settings. If they hide them, that would irritate me. So I don't know, just the search function, because they have moved stuff around the search function. If you want to change something with the window decoration.
But would it irritate you, Nate, if they would just had an advanced button where you could see all of them?
Yeah.
It would still irritate you.
Like the way GNOME does things is a train wreck. You have to go one place or another just to find the stuff that you want, just so you can use GNOME. Like if they want to make, they vary.
To put it in terms you'd understand, Rocco, it would be like a pixel being out of place for him.
Right,
like
but I guess what I'm asking is that because you're familiar with KDE and you know where all the settings are, and you don't know where all the settings are in GNOME?
I know they're
or
I know they're all here, and they've added things, they've shifted things around, and sure, I don't necessarily like when they shift it because I know where to go. But it's very easy if I don't remember. I can just say, like display, or I can say,
right.
What would I do? And I just type it in the search, and it just.
I think that the question is less about them not being there and more about that the default is just that they're not all thrown at you at once. It's just like a toggle between a simple mode that is kind of more appealing to what I'd say a user who's not particularly interested in having to customize every little piece. And
So they already have, at the top you can switch between, is it the menu on the left or is it an icon view? So maybe there would be something there where it would just be more of a simple view versus a...
But if it was me implementing it, I would, if you search for something and say you search for display and say that didn't happen to be in the simple settings, you could still see it show up but grayed out. Maybe saying, in advanced settings, check this box, blah, blah, blah. But something to allow the setting to be there, but not every setting be visible for every person.
Right. Colin, go ahead real quick. Sorry.
Well, Thomas has been waiting for a while. If you want to get Thomas to have a go first.
Hey, go ahead, Thomas, before you go, there is a virtual hand that you can put up so you don't have to hold your hand up. I'm just saying, it'd be easier on your
nobody
arm.
checks it. I know, but nobody checks
they do.
it.
We all check
you started checking it now. Nice.
Yeah, we all
okay.
check it.
I'll use that more often then. But I was just going to say, is it not possible to, let's say you have Kubuntu installed and you have KDE set up the way you want to, and you have a separate home partition, and then just wipe your Kubuntu, install it, but leave your home partition and install KDE Neon, and your settings from Kubuntu be picked up by KDE Neon because they're stored in your home directory, or are they stored somewhere else?
No, they're stored in your home directory.
Okay, because I would think that would be a really smart idea on something to do, because that way, and this is actually something I've experienced myself, if you have that separate home directory, well, it can make it so that you may end up with less space if you have a single hard drive on your computer. If you have that separate home directory, if something happens and you need to wipe and reinstall, or you can't figure out what a bug is and just decide to do that, or you want a distro hop, you can just, boom, point it to your home directory, you're good. And it can be a huge lifesaver, especially if you have that massive bug where you can't figure out where it is. And you can just...
I've found in the past that some distros, different distros using the same home directory can have different things within the home directory, and it can sort of mess up the desktop environment a bit. But if you're doing it on the same distro and just updating it, it may possibly work. There just may be a few different folders that may vary slightly. That's from my experience, because I've tried that before. And it may work and it may not work. But I was just going to
go ahead.
I was just going to add, when it comes to a train wreck in changing things, if you want to just turn off system sounds, go for broke on Plasma and see if you can find it, because that is a train wreck, just trying to find system sounds in Plasma. That I've never gone through so many places to find system sounds, and I would never have thought it would be under notifications. That's for sure.
I'm going to play the role of Alan Pope for a moment and say, have you reported that?
There's nothing to report. It's just hard to find.
But if they do take suggestions. I mean, I logged a bug right after 5.18 came out, and they jumped on it immediately. Within an hour, they had it fixed. So just saying.
Okay, I could be crazy, but can't you just right-click on the little speaker icon? And
No, as far as I remember, I don't think that worked.
No, it's you have to like adjust the sound of like the notification for that particular event. Like it's rather weird.
And each event is different.
Yeah, it is a real pain to do. There's probably some scripted way to do it at the command line, but good luck
Just unplug
finding
the
it.
speakers, guys. It's not that hard.
All right, we're gonna have Chris add the last comment, and then we're gonna move on to wrapping up.
Thing that it seems that I'm hearing is that if there was a bit more organization and standardization of terms, so if you had like a hierarchical type of I wouldn't say menu, but I mean just a list, so you can so anything dealing with desktop, then displays, and then keyboard be under, let's say, like human input, something like that. That might be a little bit better than just having a flat list of terms that may or may not be standard to other desktops or other distros. And that's a big step, because then with all differences to Nate, you'd be able to figure out, oh, okay, I need to deal with this group of settings, rather than trying to go through an entire list of things that you may or may not know. Okay, this sounds like what I need, but this is actually affecting something else, or affects it in a different way. And that's the major thing. Then the last point I wanted to make was that if you have an enterprise level environment where you have a central server that's authenticating, your home drive is on another server. So when you log on to a local machine, it pulls that information down, and it really helps in having a homogeneous environment across several different machines or what have you.
Right.
That'd be one way to go.
Well, like we see with a lot of people with like tiling window managers, right? You share your dot files. I think you could probably do the same things with Plasma as well. But I think we could go on for several more hours about that. I'm glad I got some conversation out of you guys. For a minute there, I wasn't sure if anyone was interested, even in the slightest. So it turns out you were. You just weren't forthcoming. So anyway, go ahead, hand it back to Rocco.
Well, the last thing I want to bring up is that the Peppermint team is looking for a maintainer to help with the project. Eric, maybe you can fill in some of the details for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had a couple community members this week make videos. I believe Colin and Steve made a video on this. The future of Peppermint is slightly questionable, simply because obviously with the passing of our dear friend Mark Greaves, who had done so much work on keeping Peppermint together. He was a packager and a maintainer, but it goes beyond. So the post that was put out there, the answer that Steve got, that I'll let him actually elaborate on, was that what they're looking for is a maintainer and a packager, and it's not necessarily technically challenging, but it's a huge time commitment, from what I understand. So Steve, can you fill us in on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I reached out to Kendall Weaver, one of the original founders of Peppermint. He's been doing a lot, in the forum, and I know it's still kind of early, it's only been a few weeks. So, but everybody's kind of asking me in chat rooms and that, I don't know why, but what's going on with Peppermint. So I figured I'd go and ask Kendall. You know, he could not answer me but he was really nice, and what I posted in my video, you know, was his comment. Yeah, they need a maintainer. Someone that has some system admin skills may be good, but it is very time consuming. You know, he said when him and Shane first started Peppermint, you know, he was young, single, you know, lived in a minuscule apartment, had nothing to do, and now he's married, got some kids, and he does a lot, I believe, some athletic stuff, swimming and cycling and that. So he has no time. So he's very capable, but not, you know, he doesn't have the time for it. So I'm not sure, you know, I don't know, and maybe Zeb out there can answer a little bit, but I'm not sure who's capable of doing what at Peppermint right now. So, you know, I made the video. Colin kind of piggybacked on that and did a real nice version. And we're trying to see if we can get some, you know, momentum going, you know, see who can possibly, you know, step up and do it. I mean, if it happened with Endeavor, you know, and Entergos, it sure can happen with Peppermint. So
it seems like maybe it's a lot to ask for one person, but I wonder if maybe it could be something that is shared between more than just one person. Colin, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this. I know you made the video. You're obviously supporting it and trying to get the word out there. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's a situation where they've had a loss and they need to fulfill a position. So I understand that, and that must be pretty hard for those guys. Jason Evangelo, I think it was, said he's gonna try and help put the word out. He made a comment on my video, so hopefully he can do something there, because I think he would be a lot more widespread than what I am, for sure. So I'm glad he commented and said he's going to help out in that point of view. Just one thing I think is slightly missing is I couldn't find exactly where or who to contact and the best place to contact. The only place I could find a contact was the passing of Mark Greaves. In the Peppermint news, there was a box to reply. I don't know if that's the way that you're supposed to contact them, or there's another way. I would really hope that somebody can give us some decent links that we can point people who are interested in the right direction.
Yeah, I sent another message to Kendall, you know, saying where can we, you know, basically if you join the forum, you're able to message Kendall directly, you know, and
okay, all right,
that would be a step there.
Yep. So if you can, please help out if you're able to, and if you have time. It's a perfect opportunity to give back to the community if you're able to. All right, we are out of time, and that's going to do it for this week. We're going to give our Clear Linux another week of testing, but everybody gets the last word. Eric?
Rocco, thanks as always for putting this together, and especially tonight. I know you're not feeling very well, and you're a soldier for pushing through it and still getting here and opening up for us. So I look forward to trying Clear Linux in this upcoming week and giving my feedback on it. And other than that, everybody have a great week.
Nate, last word.
Hey, thanks, Rocco, for having this and for putting, taking your time to put this all together. I appreciate what you and Eric do, and I look forward to giving Clear Linux a spin and talking about it next week.
All right. Bash, last word, sir.
All right. Well, thanks for the stream as always, and everybody have a good week.
Short and sweet. All right. Tony, nothing to install this week.
I'll have to live with it. Thanks, as always, Rocco, for doing this. Sorry you're not feeling too well. I hope you're better for next week. But I appreciate the fact that you're here and the show's gone on. And thanks to Eric and Nathan for backing him up. I think he needed it this week more than normal. I'll have another go with Clear Linux and see how I get on. I won't take up any more time. I'll let it move along so Rocco can get to sleep or whatever.
All right. Peter, last word.
So I took up the slack for Tony because during the show I installed Linux Mint 19.3 XFCE to test. So I'll have fun with that. So whether you use Linux Mint, Solus, OpenSUSE, Arch, or even Elementary for some strange reason, we are a community. So great to be here.
All right, fantastic. Big Pod, last word.
Sleep is trying to claim me, so thank you for having me and see you next week.
All right. Stephen, last word.
Thanks, Rocco, Nate, and Eric. And good to see everyone. See you next week.
All right. Dan, last word.
Rocco, thank you for hosting such a wonderful show with so many wonderful people that join us and come in here. I really hope you feel better. I'm praying for you that you get better real soon. And, you know, I know in the wintertime, it's kind of a real drag. You deal with the cold, the wind, and everything else. And on top of that, you got a bug that's pulling you down. With that said, thanks for everybody showing up here tonight, and take care, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Penguin, last word.
Well, thanks for having me, and I will see everyone next week.
Okay. Jason, last word.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for everybody who does all the behind the scenes work for the show and allowing us to get together and discuss things going on in the community and around Linux. And Rocco, I hope you do feel better. And I do recommend, I know you don't drink, but I do recommend a good hot toddy. Those things are amazing when you got the coughs and the sniffles and stuff. Get yourself some whiskey, some honey, and some lemon, and make a nice hot cup of tea and mix it together. You get yourself a good thing to help you get over it.
Sound medical advice. Thanks, Jason. All right, Paul, last word. Oh, he might not be there. Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there he is. Okay.
Yeah, thanks everybody. A great show tonight. Yep. Get well, Rocco.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Dave?
Thank you, Rocco and crew. Rocco, get well soon. And if anybody is interested, next Saturday morning in the U.S., afternoon in Europe, Serge and I are going to do a live stream like he did with Zebedee Boss, doing a live Gentoo install.
Yes, thank you I forgot to mention that. I actually was supposed to prompt you for that, so good on you for remembering. I spent 2 hours with Serge this morning. So.
I told him I would mention it, so I did.
Very good, very good. Schickel, last word, sir. We can't hear you.
I don't know how to use use my keyboard. Thank you guys for having me. It's fun as always. It's nice to try weird and wacky distros. Even if they're not elementary, they're still cool. And it was great seeing you guys all here, especially you, Rocco. I didn't know you were sick, but get better soon, or else we'll come for you. And hope to see you guys all next week.
All right, thank you. Steve, last word.
All right, Rocco, you take care. Am I the only one that noticed that Rocco got trolled by a flat earther on his last spotlight?
No, you're not.
Don't make him laugh.
Take care,
everybody. Ricky, last word.
I just want to say thanks for having me on again. It was a pleasure, and goodbye.
All right. Daniel.
Oh, figures if help if I work the buttons right. Thanks again, as always, Rocco. I hope you feel better, man. I know how it feels to be under the weather. Eric, Nate, and everybody else for filling in and taking up the slack and doing all the behind stuff as usual. Glad I could make it this week, and looking forward to next week.
All right, thank you. Vince, last word, sir.
I second the advice on the hot toddy. It's fantastic. You'll love it. Thank you also to Eric and Nate. Everyone here in Zoom, everyone in chat, you guys rock. I love the community. Thanks.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Colin.
Eric and Nate, great job tonight. Sorry I interrupted you earlier, Nate, but I couldn't hear you talking. So there's something really weird with your sound tonight. But Rocco, get better soon. Sorry to see you sick there, mate. And just speaking about Serge, he called me a chab 3 times on one of my show notes. So
you got to watch that Serge guy.
It's a term of endearment for him.
Was he accurate when he said it?
Yes, he was. I was a chab with what I was doing, but I always like to upload chabby things. It's good fun. So great night tonight, and see you all next week.
All right, Adam, first and last word.
I forgot I was in here. You guys were just schizophrenic voices in my head. Doing all right. Good show. Good times. Everybody, nice words.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Thomas.
Well, hi there.
Hi.
Sorry I was so late this time. I had family in the area, so I had to entertain them. Other than that, thanks for at least letting me on so I can talk at least a little bit. I'm sorry you were sick, Rocco. I hope you feel better soon. And Clear Linux. It's fun so far. I'll talk more about it next week, assuming I'm on time.
Sounds good. All right, Chris, last word.
I heard from a reliable source, aka nursing friends in the nursing profession, that alcohol doesn't kill the viruses. Use bleach. So sanitize your keyboards and your mice and stuff like that. And
good thing I don't have to drink it.
I wasn't sure where that was going for a second.
I wasn't either.
But hey, Rocco, get better soon. And thanks for hanging in there and doing the stream today. And Eric, thanks for doing the co-hosting. I mean, you become his right-hand man as far as getting the digital stuff going.
So go.
And I hope to see Zed back soon.
Yeah.
So
yep.
Anyway, other than that, everybody stay. Anybody in the Northeast, stay warm. Thank God we got through the cold snap last night, and other than that, everybody party on, and be excellent to each other, white stallion, etc. Have a good night.
All right, Chris,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right.
So Linux Spotlight, I'll do the wrap up for that. So last week was Yuri Herrera of Nitrix OS and Breeze Themes and Icon Panels. And this week, Rocco's talking to Matt, aka Dark One Linux. So that should be a very interesting episode.
Oh, the bleeps. No,
Wait, I'm gonna give it away and say that I didn't have to put one clown horn in that episode, if you can believe that.
So
I can't. Matt's good like that.
Nate and I tease him, but we contend that he is actually a super nice guy. He likes to
anybody
look,
to know, though.
yeah, he doesn't want anyone to know, but
He just likes to put that persona on.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
really
he's not pretty
Lionheart.
good about it.
Yep. All right. Well, we're out of time.
Care Bear, he'd be a Lionheart.
We are
Absolutely.
officially closed for business. Thank you, Eric, for helping out. I appreciate it. Nate, thank you for helping out.
Absolutely.
And we will see all of you next week. Until then, long live Linux.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Rocco, that bleach does not go in the hot toddy.
Yeah, no, definitely not.